Welcome to another itcultsack.co.uk video. Today I'm going to be upgrading my computer, getting rid of the old Intel Core 2 quad processor and going over to a far more modern AMD processor. So first things first, anti-static precautions. If you haven't got a wristband, you can always just touch the metal case, but if you have got a wristband it's far better to use one, so we'll just clip this onto a spare bit of case and we'll get started. The first things first, start unplugging all the wires, and I'll just remove the Wi-Fi antennas to start with, because I always forget those. Unfortunately, because I'm using an old processor, I'm also having to change the motherboard over today. So there's no real order to this. You've got to unplug everything. So that's the graphics card's power supply gone. Power supply for the motherboard. I just took that out of the way. Right, so that's all the various power cables and data cables from inside the case disconnected, and we'll just try and move those out of the way as best we can. And now we need to remove our graphics card and the other attached devices. Dead simple if you're using a quick release key. These things, let's just slide out inside. Bits I've screwed in, so I'll just unscrew those. Keep the screw, and we'll use that to put the Wi-Fi card back in later on. Graphic card and the first lost screw. Right, so now we can just remove the motherboard itself. We'll start unscrewing it. You can remove the heatsink for the processor if you want, but since I'm just taking the whole thing out, I don't see the need to remove it. Again, we just put the screws to one side for this so we can reuse them. you are doing this yourself, I do recommend that you buy a nice big ATX sized case. It does make working inside the computer a lot easier than if you're using a micro ATX case. It's just so much more space to move around. Right, so I think that's all the screws. Oh, there's one, always miss one. And we'll just gently lift out of the old motherboard. There we go. Put that to one side. Pop off the old cover for the USB ports and insert the new one. Obviously when you insert the new one, just check which way around it goes against the motherboard. Make sure you put it in the right way. And that just pops into place. Like that. Just take on your motherboard out of the anti-static bag. And just line that up. And you should see it line up with the screw holes as well. Let's check everything's in the right position. That's it, and you can start screwing it down. Screws don't have to be particularly tight, just secure. So that's our new motherboard in. So now for the new processor. Now first things first, so the lever here goes up. Get the new processor. So here we have an AMD 6350 FX Black Edition 6 core CPU. Runs at 4.2 gigahertz. And now if you note in the case there's a little marking on one of these corners just there. If you line that up with a little arrow on the processor itself, that's the way it should slot in. And these things are designed to key in, so they only slot down one way. So once that's on, push down the lever, hook that back under again, and that locks the processor onto the motherboard. You get the fan. This fan comes with thermal paste, thermal compound already applied to the underside of the heatsink. If the fan you're using doesn't, I think most do these days, but if your fan doesn't, then do purchase some thermal compound and just apply a little bit to the underside before you install the fan, as it will help heat transfer back out. Puts over a little plastic tab on that side. On the other side, and that just locks in place. This cable here is the power supply for the fan, and you can refer to the manual that comes with the motherboard to find out where this plugs into, or if you actually look on the motherboard itself, they're quite well labelled. And if you just see on this one, I don't know if the camera will pick it up, it does say CPU fan. So it is labelled CPU fan. Again, it's keyed, so you can only install this the right way around. Now the slot's on. So that's that hooked up. Next we'll install our RAM. I've checked the manual first for this. All 4 slots on this motherboard are for DDR3 RAM only. Some motherboards you can have different versions of RAM, and it's the 2 white slots, the slots 1 and 2, so they're the ones we'll fill first. Pull the tabs back. Right, so I'm going to install the RAM next. Now if you notice, there's little slots, little grooves there and there on the socket there, and they correspond to the notch that's in the RAM. So again, you can only install RAM the right way round. Push it in, and don't be afraid to push down fairly hard, and you'll see that the clips just pop up and click into place, and then you know the RAM's securely installed. I suppose I should talk briefly about form factors. This is an ATX size case, and it will take an ATX sized motherboard and ATX sized power supply. I could fit a smaller motherboard. However, if you buy a micro sized ATX case, you couldn't buy an ATX sized motherboard, you'd have to buy a micro sized motherboard as well, otherwise it won't all fit together. The only other thing you have to check really when you're building a computer yourself is that the socket type for the processor matches the socket type of the processor, so that they fit together and are compatible, otherwise they won't fit and it won't work. Other than that, really you can buy any component and it will work in your system. Right, so we've got that connected, the RAM's up, the CPU's on. Next, I think we'll connect our power supplies. So we've got a 24 pin power supply to the motherboard, which is the main power supply. Hello dog. Again, this is keyed so it only connects one way. I'll just slide that on till it clicks in place. Now, my old motherboard had an 8-pin second power supply for the motherboard, so I've got an 8-pin connector. However, the new motherboard's only got a 4-pin connector. And if I'm right, cleverly this splits in half. Yeah. And I should be able to use just half of it to power the motherboard. And the other half is just redundant. That's connected. Next, it's a good idea to hook up data cables. So we'll do those next. At this point, pass me those cables, Andy. On top of that, that's it. I always like to use new SATA cables. They come with the motherboard, so I may as well make use of them. And the first up is the hard drive. And that just plugs in and then plugs into SATA port on here. Like so. And then I'll only have a SATA device. Here's my DVD player. Okay, that's those, and then we've got USB ports from the top of the case up here. So we've got USB ports there. This is the cable, and that just plugs in down at the bottom here. Now we have the other fun job of connecting up our power switch, reset switch and the associated LED lights, which is these cables here, and they plug onto this little bank here, which is usually labelled. Sometimes and this bit I do find a bit fiddly. that, lovely. Next we've got a second USB port to connect. Like that. And we can put the graphics card back in now. Line it up with the socket and push it down. You can hear it lock into place. And we just screw that back on. And a bit fiddly to get the screws lined up into the hole, which is why the quick release devices are so popular. But I think screws are a little bit more secure. I prefer using them. So that's on. Now I need power supply for that. It's a beast of a graphics card, so it takes two separate power supplies. That's that in place. And Wi-Fi card. Again, line it up, push it in, and we'll screw it down. So that's that in place. Attach the antennas back on. And that's about it. I have a pretty much done new computer.